Welcome, everyone. I want to thank you all for making time in your schedules to connect this afternoon. Just a bit of housekeeping to begin. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with donors afterwards. All right, now that that's out of the way, let me introduce myself. My name is Justin Landry, a loyal MC and supporter of ALS Canada, and most recently taking on the role of Fund Development Activation Specialist for the organization. Personally, as some of you might know, I have been touched by the disease, so this is a cause close to my heart. Having lived with a person who has battled ALS, I've seen the challenges that people with ALS go through every day, mentally, physically, emotionally, and financially. This webinar event provides us with an opportunity to share how your support impacts the organization, and more importantly, people and families living with ALS, families like mine. More than 3,000 Canadians live with ALS, and each year 1,000 more Canadians are diagnosed, and we lose another 1,000. Each person is faced with the uncertainty of a disease that is unpredictable and unique to the individual. What we can say for certain, though, is that ALS Canada is here to support people throughout their ALS journey, and we cannot do it without the support of generous donors like you. What are some of the ways that your donations have made a difference? For those who are newly diagnosed, that might mean providing them with information on how to build their healthcare team and connecting them to information and resources in their community. For someone who is a caregiver, it might mean providing them with an outlet to advocate for their partner or friends' access to care and treatment through our letter writing campaigns to the government. Or for someone living with ALS, it could mean funding game-changing research as part of our national ALS Canada research program. In Ontario, it might mean providing valuable equipment and help with costly changes to one's living environment and transportation needs. With the generous support of our donors, last year, we were able to provide more than 2,300 pieces of equipment to people in Ontario registered with ALS Canada. In addition, we were able to fund more than 15 new research projects, having invested more than $2.7 million. And all of this is made possible because of our generous donors. So once again, thank you for being here. Thank you for making a difference. In sharing the importance of your support and the impact you have on our advocacy efforts, programming, and research, all in working toward our mission to transform the lives of people living with ALS, I will now hand it over to the CEO of the ALS Society of Canada, Tammy Moore. Tammy, good morning, or good afternoon.
Okay, thank you very much, Justin. And I'd like to welcome all of you to the ALS Canada donor webinar. Really glad that you're able to join us today, and I'm really looking forward to having our team share some of the work that we're doing that your valuable donations are helping to fund. But first, I'd like to give you just a bit of insight, because so often when we're talking about ALS Canada, people know our organization from the area that they're most familiar with. And they're often very surprised to find out about the broad base of our mission. And I think it's something that makes our organization very unique. At ALS Canada, we're not only addressing the needs of people who are affected by ALS today, but we're thinking about what the needs will be in the future. And currently we're undergoing a very intensive strategic planning exercise to make sure that we're looking that more 10 years, 20 years out. We're also very purposeful when we talk about our mission, that we talk about supporting people that are affected by ALS. That's not just the person who's been given the diagnosis, but it also recognizes that the people around that person are also affected by ALS. Their loved ones, family, their friends, co-workers, as well as their caregivers. And so our systems, our processes, our services really help to respond to that overall aspect that's required. It also means that our reach is multiplied that much more than the number of people who are given a diagnosis with ALS. And as Justin identified, that could be about 1,000 people each year. And when we look at those services that we provide at ALS Canada, Kim, who you'll hear from a little bit later, will be talking about the more than 1,200 people that we have supported just in 2022 who are living with ALS. But when you multiply that out and you think about caregivers and family and loved ones, that number easily could be up to 5,000 people. And when you extrapolate that out across the country, we're not now talking about tens of thousands of Canadians who are affected by ALS, who ALS Canada is providing services to each and every day of the year. And so I'd like to just give you a quick overview before we get into the presentations that Lauren is going to share with you, Dave and Kim later on. You know, when we think about the services in the province of Ontario, I think about the very individual aspects of them. From the moment somebody is diagnosed and registers with ALS, the way that our community leads help them by going into their homes, providing them with very individualized information, resources, connecting them into the specific resources within their community. I think about the equipment, and when we say equipment, it's something, you know, like a wheelchair, a hospital lift, or even a lift chair. But when we think about what does that mean, you know, the stories of people who share them with us, who talk about it wasn't just a lift chair. That chair helped me to keep my independence. It helped me to be still mobile. The way that a scooter helps somebody to still be able to do their daily things that they love to do, like walk their dogs or go and get their own groceries. That independence, that safety that comes from caregivers is such an important aspect about it. We also are very intentional about balancing that immediate need of people who are living with ALS today with the requirements for the future and where we need to make a difference. You're going to hear from Lauren, who's going to talk about our advocacy initiatives. And you know, today is a very interesting day because today, the second therapy this year has just been approved by Health Canada. And I think about how that needle has moved. I think about when it was 20 years ago that we had a therapy approved. I think about when my cousin Doug was given a diagnosis, and that was all that was available to him. And I think about now where we are in turning that tide, and that this year alone, we've had 2 therapies approved. Now, what we've learned, and Lauren's going to share with you, is that an approval doesn't mean access. And so there's much more work to do to be able to make sure that every Canadian has timely and equitable access to a therapy. But we're on that, and we're helping to make sure the system is well informed, community members are empowered, and that we are having the needs of our community that are heard at the right places in the right areas so that we can make a difference. We're also providing information, and this weekend we're going to be launching again the Canadian ALS Learning Institute, helping to make sure people understand, are informed about what it is to have ALS, what the disease is, research, ways that they can advocate, so they can not only be informed for themselves, but also empowered to help bring their voices forward to make change. And in the coming year, we're going to be talking about the webinars and the other information resources that will be available to all Canadians. And when we think about the future, we think about research. And you're going to hear from David, who's going to be talking about the ALS Canada Research Program. And it's easy to think about that critical investment that we're making alongside our partner in Brain Canada in, you know, the peer review panel that just happened for the Discovery grants, making sure that we're making investments in really crucial, very innovative research projects that are happening. But we're also a convener and a catalyst. And ALS Canada this year has stepped forward to bring industry together to help address a very critical deficiency in Canada, which is the time to diagnosis. Once people can get to an ALS clinic, they can move quite quickly into being able to help manage their disease. But it can take 20 months or more in Canada to be getting a diagnosis. So we're looking forward to how can we change that reality, because that's going to be key for individuals to be able to get access to therapies as well. And the future also includes international reach. And I think this is where the expansiveness of ALS Canada's work really gets there. So whether it's our involvement on the International Alliance and the way that we work together with other organizations around the country, around the world, or whether it's our involvement on the International Advocacy Committee, as we're trying to get global regulators to help make sure that there are streamlined pathways for ALS therapies, or whether it's how we're helping to influence and be able to participate in research projects that are happening internationally so that things aren't being done in isolation. But there's only one way that all of this work gets done, and it's because of the generosity of donors like you. So thank you. Thank you for powering our work. Thank you for making a difference. Thank you for helping us to support people today as we work to create a different future for what it will mean to be diagnosed not only with ALS in Canada, but around the world. And thank you. Before I share the screen to Lauren, I'd just like to offer a different kind of opportunity, and that's a land acknowledgement. Because here at the ALS Society of Canada, we continue our learning and the work of addressing inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. As an organization, we work to ensure that we understand and consider how these issues and opportunities for change reflect in our culture for our staff and our volunteers, how it reflects in our work and what we do to support the community we serve, in the research we invest in our collaboration with the healthcare system and with partnerships and industry, and how as an organization we can demonstrate leadership to address systemic issues. As a national organization, the ALS Society of Canada has relationships and partnerships across the country, operating on the unceded and treaty territories of the original people of Turtle Island. Today, I am speaking to you from Toronto, where we acknowledge that this land is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and we acknowledge that this area is covered by Treaty 13, signed by the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Williams Treaties, and signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. I encourage you to take the opportunity to reflect on the land where you live and work and to learn more about the people who have been the stewards. And now I'd like to pass this over to Lauren to be able to share with you some of the work that we're doing in stakeholder engagement and advocacy. Thanks for being here today. And Lauren, over to you.
I was still muted. Thank you so much, Tammy. So to introduce myself, my name is Lauren Poplack, and I am the Senior Manager of Advocacy and Stakeholder Relations. So as Tammy said, I'm here to talk to you guys a little bit about how your donor dollars have helped us move forward our advocacy work. So first and foremost at ALS Canada, our advocacy work is grounded in the experiences of our community. We work with the ALS community to inform our priorities and make sure that we are empowering people affected by ALS as community advocates to bring forward their own personal stories. And where appropriate, we even build on the grassroots activities started by our community. Because ultimately, we want to work together to advocate for policy change that will have a real impact on people living with ALS today and in the future. So the reason why we regularly engage with different groups and different levels of government is because their actions and decisions affect the ALS community. So for example, we engage provincially with the Ontario government. They run programs that enable people to access home care and equipment, and they make decisions about which ALS treatments are covered through the provincial drug programs. We also engage with the federal government, who is Canada's biggest funder of health research. And through Health Canada, the federal government is responsible for regulating new therapies and deciding which ones will be approved. And the federal government is starting to look more closely at regulating and managing the cost of treatments for rare diseases, including ALS. But our advocacy work is not just about engaging with government. Advocacy includes engaging with an ecosystem of stakeholders. So for example, as Tammy mentioned, we are frequently engaging with companies developing ALS treatments because they make the decisions about which countries they're going to bring their drugs and make them available. We work very closely with other nonprofit organizations who are working towards the same goal so that we can leverage a coalition approach to make our voices even louder. And we are in frequent connection with clinicians, researchers, the Canadian ALS Research Network, otherwise known as CALS, because they are critical groups to engage with to ensure alignment and understanding, because their work so closely relates to our advocacy focuses. So ultimately, we work with government at all levels, as well as an ecosystem of stakeholders to influence the decisions that people make in a way that will make things better for people living with ALS. So a little bit about our priorities. As Tammy mentioned off the start of this webinar, today, the third, or actually the fourth drug ever was approved in Canada for use, and it is the second this year alone. So we are seeing multiple drugs go through the drug access process at the same time, which is remarkable when we used to see a drug once every 20 years. But we know that access to these therapies is a real issue for people living with ALS. And in our experience, and in the experiences of other rare disease areas, we have seen that the current drug approval and reimbursement processes in Canada do not work in a way that reflects the realities of what it means to live with ALS. So access to therapies has become a significant focus of our advocacy program for a few different reasons. Under the current process, it can take a new therapy to go from Health Canada approval all the way to actually being in the hands of somebody living with ALS 3+ years. And we know that Health Canada approval does not mean immediate access. So the longer it takes for a drug to be accessible in a affordable way, the higher the risk of thousands of Canadians dying from ALS while they wait for these treatments. So second, we are at this critical junction in the development of ALS therapies. We have a pipeline of therapies coming forward, but if we're looking at a system that's going to take 3 or more years for a drug to actually get in the hands of people who need it, that doesn't prove positive for these therapies that are going to be coming through. So we need to lay the groundwork today for those future therapies. And third, we want to make sure that there's an environment of Canada that actually attracts clinical trials and research and development. If we have a system in Canada that better supports manufacturers in bringing their product to market, we will hopefully see more clinical trials, which means more access for Canadians. ALS is a disease that already takes so much from people in such a short period of time. There is absolutely no place for red tape or drawn out processes when it comes to making decisions about whether a drug approved by Health Canada should be covered if a clinician feels that drug is right for their patient. And it certainly shouldn't come down to what province you live in. So, as I've said, it's not about the specific therapies, but it's about creating a system that better reflects the reality of ALS. And we are working to create this system in a few different ways. As mentioned, we work very closely to develop those strong relationships with companies developing ALS therapies. My team works with David Taylor and his team to make sure that those companies see Canada as a space and see us as a strong partner. In June 2021, we released a position paper called The Time Is Now, which put forward 2 concrete solutions for how we can streamline the drug access processes in Canada to better respond to the urgencies of Canadians living with ALS. This paper was updated in June 2022, so just this year, to reflect the current environment, and we have continued to advocate these recommendations at that provincial and at that pan-Canadian level. So with across all provinces, make systematic change based on these recommendations. And these recommendations are going to set a future for advocacy. In March of this year, we actually ran a virtual advocacy week in Ontario, where we called upon the Ontario government to take a leadership role and work in partnership with the ALS community to see the solutions outlined in The Time Is Now happen in Ontario. We also asked them to be a leader to their counterparts across Canada. So we had 27 advocates take part in 19 meetings, and that work continues today. And what was so key to that work is it helped us create relationships which we continue to see blossom more and more throughout the year. We have leveraged being a part of coalition campaigns to change systematic issues within the drug access process. For example, we are part of a coalition of patient organizations called Protect Our Access, which advocated against some new pricing guidelines in Canada. I'm not going to get in too much about the guidelines, except to say that there was a lot of concern that these guidelines would actually affect the ability for Canadians to get timely and equitable access to therapies. And with this coalition, we were able to advocate strongly and actually see the guidelines change and not be implemented in the way that they proposed. We also sometimes turn to those drugs that are currently going through the drug system. So, we've just launched a campaign about Albrioza asking for swift provincial reimbursement. So this is a way to demonstrate how the system isn't working and how we want to see it work. So by advocating for Albrioza, we are asking the provinces across across Canada, how Ontario-centric of me, the provinces across Canada to reimburse Albrioza swiftly and to implement those recommendations in the time is now. So again, it's focused on creating a system that is going to better meet the needs of people living with ALS, using the therapies in front of us as a way to pilot those new recommendations. And as Tammy mentioned as well off the top, it's not just about advocating as ALS Canada, it's about educating and engaging that ALS community. So on Saturday, we are actually kicking off the second year of the ALS Canada Canadian ALS Learning Institute. So this program is an intensive 28-hour learning experience on ALS research and how to be a champion for the cause. Last year, we had 19 graduates who have gone on to advocate in government meetings, be a part of our virtual advocacy week, who have spoken to media about the issues that are impacting people living with ALS, have spoken at fundraising events, and have shared their message and have continued to raise awareness. And so this year we are kicking off the program with 33 individuals who we hope to train and educate to do the same. We've also launched some new resources on our website, which might seem small, but sites that provide our community with resources to take action for change and toolkits of how to advocate with their elected officials are huge leaps forward in the advocacy work that we do. And none of that would be possible without the support of our donors who continue to enable us to make big leaps and small milestones as we move our advocacy program forward, continuing to make systematic change that is going to better the lives of people living with ALS. So with that, I am going to actually pass it over to David Taylor to come and share a little bit more about ALS research. David, off to you.
Thanks, Lauren. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I should introduce myself first. My name is Dr. David Taylor. I am Vice President of Research and Strategic Partnerships, and it's a tremendous privilege here today to have the opportunity to, first of all, say thank you for all that you've done, and to provide just a little snapshot of what we do in research here at ALS Canada. We're incredibly proud of the fact that we are obsessed with getting to a future without ALS, and doing everything we can to steward your donor dollars effectively. So at the end of the day, I can only provide you a small snapshot or a teaser because there's just so much going on, and I really hope you'll reach out afterwards so we can talk more about some of the things you might be interested in. Our organization, we're very fortunate to have some old documents from our co-founder, Dr. Arthur Hudson from London, Ontario, who is a neurologist who was seeing people with ALS and really formed our organization with others based on the fact that there was no one doing research in this field. There were no dedicated ALS researchers. And he thought that was a travesty, because if there was any disease that required to have people dedicated towards finding a future without it, it is ALS. And so over the decades, we have really taken that to heart, and we've pushed forward on a research program that we streamlined and we feel is ultimately doing everything we can to provide the most impact with every donor dollar we get in. So if I were to encapsulate this into just sort of three main buckets of what we do in terms of research, I would say it's our grants and award programs. It's also facilitation of relationships. As Lauren just told you, across the organization, we do this, and we do work in tandem with a lot of our colleagues to be able to do that. And then finally, knowledge translation, and that's being knowledge experts on the global effort towards understanding and treating ALS. From our grant program perspective, we have over the years really streamlined what we do, and we have a series of programs where we hold competitions, and we ask for people in Canada who are working on ALS at different universities to apply with their best projects or their best studies that they have. And then we put this through a rigorous peer review process, whether in some competitions it's Canadian ALS experts, and in others, we have international ALS experts who come together, review, rank, and recommend to our board, this is the best place to be able to put those really precious donor dollars. The flagship of our research program is called the Discovery Grant Program, and this is really our kind of niche in being able to seed great new ideas, high risk, high reward ideas that wouldn't get funding elsewhere, so they can get a foundation of data that they can then move forward and get multi-year funding from places like the Canadian government. We also do fund great researchers to be able to do great work on ALS. And I'll highlight just a couple of programs that we're really proud of and have significant impact. The first one's called a Career Transition Award. And this takes a superstar young researcher who's just on the cusp of being independent, getting an assistant professorship, and ultimately having their own lab to contribute to ALS research for the many years to come. The positions in Canada to get those kind of roles are very competitive. And this award actually gives them a leg up on the competition. And so far, every single person that we funded through this program has had tremendous success and is starting to have success on the international level in terms of providing impact on ALS research. We also have something called the Clinical Research Fellowship. And this actually does the same thing, but at the neurology level. So it takes a young neurologist and helps to support them into dedicating their career on care and research in ALS. This not only can provide better infrastructure and capacity across the country for people to receive better care, but it also, from a research standpoint, can help to do better clinical research here in Canada, better understand the disease, and to be able to bring more and better clinical trials to the country. As well, we bring researchers together from across Canada in our National ALS Canada Research Forum every year, and we do provide travel awards that they can go out and present their work at international conferences. All in all, we do feel like we use those donor dollars in a very evolved and streamlined way to make sure that we are putting them to the very best research here in Canada to plug into the global effort. And when it comes to that global effort, Tammy sort of touched upon something which we've never really talked about a lot, and that is we've always been a central hub or facilitator of relationships within the various stakeholders around research in Canada, that being from pharmaceutical companies to government, to the clinicians, to the laboratory researchers, to people affected by ALS. But at the same time, what we've worked really hard on in recent years is evolving ourselves to be key opinion leaders at the international level. Now, Tammy mentioned about the International Alliance of ALS MND Societies, and we've played a really big role in that, but we are also now seen as key opinion leaders all over the world in partner organizations. This year alone, we have provided important efforts to the American various organizations in the United States, Australia, the Netherlands, Italy, and other areas in Europe. And this is because what we want to do is, while we're giving out those donor dollars to our competitions, to the great research, we also want to take those and leverage it to be able to have an impact on what's happening globally in ALS research. And finally, what I talked about was knowledge translation. And you heard Lauren refer a little bit to the Canadian ALS Learning Institute. And we really feel at ALS Canada that we need to be knowledge experts when it comes to ALS, no matter where it's happening. Whether it's a basic research or laboratory research finding that happened in the southern United States, or whether it's a new clinical trial happening in Asia. We understand that this is a very difficult thing to suddenly grasp and understand how research works and what can it do for an individual. And we want to make sure that they don't feel alone and that they can get the answers they need to make informed decisions. And so we really do put emphasis on being those knowledge leaders. As mentioned, there are also many things we do that are sort of cross-Canada wide in terms of providing funding and support to big initiatives like Capture ALS. I can't really get into the details of that. It's an incredibly exciting initiative, but I urge you to go to captureals.ca to find out more. The best practice recommendations, as well as we support and manage the clinical research network that Lauren referred to earlier called CALS. So at the end of the day, really between knowledge translation, between facilitation of relationships, between having impact on the global effort of ALS and our streamlined and evolved research program, we're doing everything we can to take those precious donor dollars that you have given us and steward them as effectively as possible. We're going to get there. And it's just going to take some time because it is an incredibly complex disease, but you have helped us move there faster. And I'm really excited to know that you will help us move forward at an even faster pace by continuing to support what we do in research. And please do reach out to me, dtaylor@als.ca, or my team, research@als.ca. We're small and mighty, and we would be happy to tell you a little bit more about what we do. But with that, that's our teaser. Please feel free to ask some questions, and I would love to be able to pass this off now to one of my favorite colleagues, our Director of Community Services, Kim Berry.
Thanks, Dave. I have the absolute pleasure to be one of the last presenters today, so thank you so much for everyone taking the time to attend today. I am Kim Berry. I'm the Director of the Community Services team at ALS Canada, and I wanted to spend a few minutes just updating a little bit about things that our team is doing in the community. So currently, as Tammy mentioned earlier, we are supporting approximately 1,200 people who are living with ALS in Ontario, providing direct support to those individuals. We also have a mandate to be able to support outside of Ontario in terms of our webinar series and our educational opportunities. Right now, I would say that the most important thing that our team is doing is that when someone is diagnosed with ALS, we're able to help them navigate the healthcare system. Within 2 weeks of registering with ALS Canada, our team has the opportunity to go out and connect with that individual and their family, help give them the guidance, navigate that system, connect them to the correct people, and ensure that they have those resources that they really need to be able to reach out and feel connected with this so that they're not isolated. Also, along with being able to do those home visits, our community leads in 2021 so far have hosted 180 support groups. We have 3 different models for support groups. One we have for caregivers, one we have an open group which allows caregivers, their families and friends to attend, and we also have one that is for clients only. This is an opportunity for people in a peer support model to be able to reach out to each other, and it's facilitated by ALS Canada, but really is an opportunity for people to connect with others who are in similar situations. Really, our goal is to make sure that people feel empowered and have the resources to be able to feel supported in their own journey with ALS. When we go from going to a support group model and then going into one of the other big things that our organization does that I don't think we talk a lot about is the education. And so our community leads actually provide in-service education for people who are living in long-term care facilities, hospice programs, home and community care. We have an opportunity to connect and network with those people to ensure that they are well informed about ALS, the progression of the disease, and the individuals that they're supporting. So we have a lot of opportunity when people reach out to us to ensure that we can actually meet them where they're at. And so for long-term care homes, one of the big pieces is they're not prepared to take on the needs of someone living with ALS. So we have an opportunity to reach out, to be able to educate their staff, to do the training, to be able to have the individual be part of that so that we can make sure that there's an additional knowledge skill set within the staff who are supporting that individual. This year, we've launched our 2nd year of our webinar series, which we're really excited about. It's an ability for us to reach out and really engage people in a different way. So this is not just directly people in Ontario, but this is federally. If you live in British Columbia or you live in Nova Scotia, you can absolutely log on to a webinar and get information that's relevant to you and the topics that are important to our community. It's really important that our community feel empowered to make those decisions and really feel that they are engaged in a way that they're in control of the situation. So I know Lauren spoke earlier about knowledge translation. I know Dave spoke a little bit about that and empowering people. We really started this series with an opportunity to do the one-to-many. As an organization, we have 1,200 people directly in Ontario to support, but this allows us to connect with people who may not necessarily be within this province, but also maybe not directly connected to ALS Canada. So healthcare professionals who want a little bit more information about how to manage mobility needs or respiratory support. They all have that opportunity to connect with us in a way that is really so helpful to individuals so that they feel that their team is really well informed. One of the things that we did recently is that we've really engaged with the clinics in Ontario. And as you know, there's 5 clinics that support people living with ALS in Ontario. And our team has really been part of that essential healthcare team to ensure that people are receiving the care they need from clinics. And so our eyes and ears on the ground in people's houses, being able to go back to clinics and say, there's been a change of status. There's something going on with that person. Medically, they may need some interventions to ensure that they're not falling through that healthcare system cracks. Our goal is to make sure that those people are really well connected by all members of their healthcare team. And I think as a donor, one of the things that a lot of people talk about is our equipment program. And we're obviously extremely proud and so grateful to donors who choose to support our organization. Last year, we provided, Tammy, I think, mentioned the number 2,500 pieces of equipment to people who are living with ALS in Ontario. This year, we're on par for about 2,900 pieces of equipment. As you can imagine, that's a lot of items for a lot of people. And we have a very small but mighty team. I know Dave mentioned his small team. Our equipment program is so dedicated to making sure people get what they need. We have an ultimate goal of making sure that people receive that piece of equipment within 10 to 14 business days, that we work with 23 different vendors in Ontario. So if you live in Kapuskasing, or you live in Red Lake, or you live in London, Ontario, our goal is to provide you with the same pieces of equipment, no matter where you are. And that's a big challenge as an organization, making sure we're able to navigate that. We have requests coming in on a constant basis, people's needs changing, making sure we're meeting them where they're at, helping to plan and prepare for what's going to come. And I think that's a big part of our community leads role, is looking at, accessibility in somebody's house. Are we needing to plan? Do we need a ramp? It might not be something they need at diagnosis, but as the disease progresses, we need to be able to plan that. So our team really helps navigate that with their healthcare professionals. With that 2,700 pieces of equipment that we're on par to bring this year, we also have a funding component to our equipment program. And that's not something that's talked about a lot. And so 2 of the items that we provide funding for, one is a needs-based assessment. So based on income, we can assist and help provide funding, either a small amount of funding or the entire, depending on income, for communication devices and what's called a step chair. So a step chair comes from the central equipment pool, and it allows somebody to have a custom-made power wheelchair. And to put into context, I think it's important that people have a good understanding. A step chair for an individual can be anywhere from $25,000 to $35,000, and that is a significant cost. ADP covers 75% of that cost, but there's still a remaining 25%. So if someone is low income or struggling with their income levels, we are able to look at that and help provide some funding for that. On a lot of occasions, we're paying 100%. So as a donor, your valuable donation goes to actually providing something that is such a tangible item. It gives someone significant independence and freedom, and safely. The biggest part of this is that the pieces of equipment that we're providing need to be safe, and they need to be able to be used for people to be able to be as independent as possible. I think we're really excited about this year coming up, some of the things that we're planning. And I think Justin's going to ask us some questions about what we're excited about. But I think one of the things we're really excited about in community services is that we spent a lot of time this year looking at our bereavement program and what do our clients and families ask for. And we're managing some of those client needs in a different way, but we're also managing what people who have lost a loved one to ALS are asking us for. And so this year, we have started our bereavement support group, and we're really excited because we currently have an active group going on where people come together who have lost a loved one to ALS, where they are working with each other, and they are in a peer support model, and they are having the opportunity to really engage and work through some of the issues around losing someone with an ALS diagnosis. So that's a big part of what our team has been spending our time on this year, is the bereavement, and how do we make sure that people are supported from the beginning of the journey all the way to after they have unfortunately lost their loved one to ALS. Justin, I think I'm going to hand it back to you because, as everyone knows, I could keep going for a really long time, but I'm going to pass it back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Kim. Thank you also to Tammy and Dave and Lauren. Very informative, and I know our donors and stakeholders appreciate all the presentations made today. I know someone who has lived with a family member with ALS. It's nice to hear that you guys are on top of things and working now for the organization. I can confirm that there's some comfort there, knowing that things are moving forward, progress is being made, and we're just doing our best to look after people and families living with ALS. So we do have some time for questions. If you are joining us and you see the question box, you can pop in some questions, and we will do our best to answer those questions. Rest assured, they will be answered. If not today, we will be happy to get back to you in the near future. Dr. Dave pointed that out. I'm at jlandry@als.ca. We will answer those questions. Some people were able to email some questions when they registered, and we have one here that I would like everyone to take a crack at. What are each of you most proud of in terms of the organization's accomplishments for 2022? And Tammy, perhaps you'd like to start with that.
How long do I have? Because it's a very long list, Justin.
Fair enough. If everyone could take no more than 2 minutes, if that's possible.
All right. Yes. It's difficult to actually pick one because there are so many things that we have done that I'm very, very proud of. I'm very proud of the dedication of our team actually, and how people have dug in during difficult times and made sure that people have the supports that they require. But maybe I can tell just one story. I'll keep it to one that I really appreciate. And it speaks to one of the ways that we do fundraising, but it actually speaks to a way that we engage the community and that we help the community to feel more supported. And that's from my experience at the Revolution Ride this September. So at the Revolution Ride, it is our cycle event. It happens in Dundas, Ontario. This is the second time that we did it. And what it is so much more than a fundraiser. It's a way that people can come together to be able to see and feel their network around them. So it's this tremendous event. We started off early in the morning. We've got people that are heading out on a 90-kilometer ride. We've got others that head out a little bit later on a 40-kilometer ride. And what I found so remarkable year after year is how people are there right to the very end, making sure that the very last person who's out on that ride comes in and they have the entire support of the community around them. We have a long lineup of people down the street that are cheering them in. And so it's not just the event itself, but it's that feeling of being a part of something and of having people there so that people know that they're not alone. And the stories were remarkable, whether it was somebody who was living with ALS, who found out later on that a coworker also had ALS, and they were both there together and being able to share stories, or whether it was somebody else that I was able to meet and speak about it. And it was actually the anniversary of when his father had passed away of ALS, and he had just received a diagnosis. But it's that sharing and that sense of community that comes from our events that I think it's so powerful, and the way that our team shows up there to make sure that people feel very well supported. So that's just one of a very long list that I have, but I'll share the space with others on my team.
Thank you, Tammy. Lauren, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you guys hear me okay? Excellent. All right. So I think for me, one of the proudest achievements have been seeing how our Canadian ALS Learning Institute graduates, who are our ALS community ambassadors, have just engaged so thoroughly in the cause over the course of this year. We had many of them, the graduates who lived in Ontario jumped in and joined our virtual advocacy week back in March. They attended additional training, and to have the privilege to be in government meetings with some of them and watch how vulnerable and open they were when sharing their stories, but also how concise and knowledgeable they were when speaking about the issues that impacted ALS. So to see that translate and actually the passion of people and the empowerment that they felt after experiencing this education program, and their
thirst for more knowledge. You know, we continue to meet with our community ambassadors every about 6 weeks or so. We bring them together where we do additional presentations, we present opportunities to them for that they can take part in. We bring in guest speakers, and just to see the level of excitement that they have to keep that learning and always wanting to raise their hand, I think has been one of, I don't want to say my proudest accomplishments, because it was no means something that I did anywhere near alone, but just the organization, just seeing how successful that program was after its first year is certainly a shining moment for me.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Dr. Dave?
It was a great one, Lauren. I love our ambassadors, and the Learning Institute is a lot of fun and I think really great initiative. So now that I can use that one, I'm going to actually use two really quick that came to mind. I'm going to do a minute each, Justin, I promise. The first one is Refer ALS, which Tammy mentioned before, and this is actually an initiative that we're just sort of in the midst of launching. And what we were able to do was pull together a group of pharmaceutical companies, a group of key opinion leader clinicians from across the country from the CALS network, so ALS clinicians, as well as ALS Canada, to come together and really move the needle forward on a potential strategy for earlier diagnosis in Canada. This was something that was on our radar for years. And in 2022, we've actually started that strategy, and moving into 2023, we're going to start activating it in a way that will hopefully get people to clinics much faster. That I'm really excited about. The other one is, and I mentioned this before, I think I've just seen a huge change in where our organization is at in terms of being asked to provide opinions and to provide advice and advisory roles across the world in ALS. And that's a real testament to how we are, again, trying to do everything we can beyond just what we're doing here in Canada, and to be part of Canada's piece of the global puzzle. And I know that in just a couple of weeks, a number of us are going down to speak at the International Alliance meetings. We are, as I said, being asked to do things to advise other organizations all around the world. And I'm very proud of how I can see that evolution coming between not only doing what's best here in Canada, but also helping Canada to play its role on that global effort.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dave.
Kim.
Kim?
I guess I get to wrap this question up. First of all, I think it's a opportunity for us to come together, and I think everybody's had this running theme in our answers about what we're proud of, and I think it's the collaboration piece. I am extremely proud of my team, of course. We managed to navigate during COVID and ensure that people had support in whatever that looked like to meet people where they were at. But I think as an organization, it's bigger than that. There are so many different mandates within ALS Canada that we are all able to pull together to make decisions, and that we're all supportive of each other's mandate. There's not something that is more important. They're all equally as important. And I think when Tammy was sharing her story about the Revolution Ride, for me, actually, it was the walk. And this was the first year I actually went to the Ottawa Walk. And it was also one of the first walks of the season. And amazingly, for me, it was about the engagement in the community. Coming back in person was just so amazing for me. And I thought, well, during COVID, did I miss it? It was just something that happened. And, you know, we did virtual and we pivoted and we made things happen, and it was amazing. But what I came to discover was how much I missed it as much as our community missed it. So I was so grateful for the day and people being excited and getting to see people you had actually never met in person, but you had communicated with. Just the opportunity for our community to really rally was amazing.
Thank you so much, Kim. Yeah, I think a lot of people would echo your sentiments there. We do have an online question from a webinar participant, Christine, who asks a question of Dr. Taylor. Her question is, Dr. Taylor, I was hoping to hear about specific research initiatives that you are monitoring that might be promising.
Gosh, there are a ton of things that are promising. I think if I were to pick specific ones out, I would say, as I mentioned, Capture ALS is a great one to look at. This is Canada's piece of understanding the differences of from person to person with ALS. We know that, we can understand how to bring therapies to clinics, but if we don't understand why one person is different from the other well enough, we can't run those clinical trials as effectively. But I think, happy to talk offline, but there are more clinical trials than ever before. There are far, far more companies invested in developing new treatments for ALS than there were 5 years ago. We're talking 10 to 20 to now 150 to 200 companies. And just the number of therapeutic targets that have come from solid ALS research over the last 5 years and have now made it towards the clinic and are getting close to being clinical trials makes me incredibly excited for the type of therapies we might have in the next few years, which can have a much more tremendous impact. And a great one to look into is one called tofersen, which is actually focused really well on strong ALS laboratory research and is having some significant impact in people. And so I think it's a really good testament to the fact that we will get there someday, and we just need to keep pushing forward.
Yeah, lots to look forward to with that. Thank you very much, Dr. Dave. Another question for the team here that are presenting. What projects are you most excited for 2023, and how can our supporters continue to make meaningful contributions in the new year? Tammy?
So a major initiative that we have underway that we'll be working on through to next year is actually our strategic planning exercise. And it is a robust exercise to be able to do because we want a lot of stakeholder engagement. So we've started off our initial sessions with having the different people from our committees and councils throughout our governance structure. So our board, which also includes people living with ALS, both with familial ALS as well as sporadic ALS. We also have people from our Community Services Advisory Council, our Scientific and Medical Advisory Council, our Advocacy Committee, and other diseases, organizations, partners, and pharmaceutical companies who help to provide the first input into that process. We're going to be going out and talking to other stakeholders, donors, and others who would like to be involved in it, whether it's through surveys or direct input and interviews, because we really want to gather that, because we have a very strong strategic plan that set us up for the 3 to 5 years. We're now pushing into the 4 to 5 years of that plan, and we want to look at what's next. What do we need to be in 10 years? What will be the needs, and how can we help to be that convener, facilitator, catalyst to make sure that the changes are in place to be able to support people appropriately and be that difference maker for the future. And so that's a major initiative of our organization, and I think a really important piece, because often even in that process you start to catalyze other conversations from other groups that can help to make those changes. So that's a major initiative that I'm looking forward to for 2023.
Sounds good. Yeah, looking for those outcomes. And Lauren, how about you?
Goodness. I think for 2023, I'm really looking forward to continuing the momentum that we have started to gain. We're starting to see small milestones and big milestones as it relates to access to therapies and all of our advocacy asks. And I'm just really excited to see those relationships continue to grow and to see more and more community members become involved. And, thinking about how our donors can support us, it's, continuing to help enable us to get those community members involved and engaged, because it really is their voices, their perspective, and their experiences that drive the work that we do. So what Tammy mentioned, having the chance to do some data collection and interviews and understand those stories better so that we can continue to form those relationships, advocate to that ecosystem of stakeholders, and continue to create milestones and move forward with all our different advocacy asks.
Thank you very much, Lauren. And Dr. Dave?
I would say that it is, again, back to the earlier diagnosis strategy, only so I can quickly mention that what Kim said about collaboration, that is a really great testament to how this has been a collaboration, not just outside our organization with ALS Canada, but within the organization. This is truly cross-functional across our organization, and that's really exciting. But what I'm actually going to say is something that I can't tell you much about just yet. It's a bit of a teaser again. Please stick with us, because I think in the next short while we may be able to reveal a bit more, but I think we're going to be doing something that is very unique on the grant funding landscape from a pilot that we're going to do. It's based around urgency, and it's really how do we take the great peer review process that exists in science and kind of turn that on its head in a way that helps to meet the needs of people living with ALS, which is that we need to be able to do things quickly, and we need to do them well and also with urgency. And so I can't reveal exactly what that is yet, but I'm very excited for it. I think it's going to be very new and novel, and I'm super excited to share it with you in the months ahead. And so there's my answer that nobody got a real answer from, but I'm excited and you asked. So
I'm excited also. I think we're all excited. And look, you've already gained a global reputation for leadership in this field, and it's no surprise to see why. So thank you. Keep up the good work, and I'll ask Kim now what she has to say.
I feel like David has teased us all with something that now we're going to be all sitting on the edge of our seats waiting to hear. So Dave, we're going to hold you to sharing that eventually. I think for me, similar to what Tammy and Lauren had mentioned, is this 2023 for us is about some of the data and future planning for ALS Canada and our community services team, and looking at what the needs are for people who are not even involved with our organization at this point. They don't even know they need us. Potential diagnosis down the road, and what supports are required for those people. And so we're really digging into some of that, and we've really made the investments in 2022 to be able to really guide us through that process and help lead us to getting some of those answers, some of that data around the number of people diagnosed, if there's an increase across the board in Canada, what does that look for each of the provincial societies? But as an organization, how do we support those one-to-many? So we're really digging into that in 2023. So it's maybe not this extreme answer, but for us, it's something that's really going to help us form how we work in the future.
Tammy, Kim, Lauren, Dr. Dave, thank you all so much. If you did send us a question and we weren't able to get back to you during this webinar, rest assured we will get back to you in person very soon. Not to worry. Of course, they'll be comforted to know that this was recorded, and we'll be sending our participants recording, and it will live forever too on YouTube. To everyone who joined us today, I hope that you found today's webinar enlightening. ALS Canada, or at ALS Canada, people living with ALS are at the center of everything that we do. I hope from the presentations that took place today that you've been able to learn more about our mission, about our work, and how your donor dollars create real impact. You've been all invited today because you are significant supporters of the work that we do at ALS Canada. We know that we need the support of generous donors like you to help realize this potential. We hope you enjoyed spending time with us this afternoon. Hopefully you were able to enjoy some lunch. I had a participant send me a note beforehand asking if it was okay if they could eat without being seen. I assured them that they were fine. So we're mindful of the demands on people's time, and thank you for joining us. Look, this ends our webinar, but we look forward to continuing our conversation with you and finding more ways to connect. Please reach out to me or my team at any time if you have any questions. I'd also like to thank the team at ALS Canada for helping to produce this webinar. There's lots of dedicated professionals on the back end who made this all possible. To everyone joining us today, thank you very much. Take care.